We're going to try to have as interactive a conversation as we can about navigating the college admissions process.
We've used the Common App for a long time now, and we get just as much information off the Common App as we do through school-specific. Now I'm sympathetic to schools that want to know very specific, because one of the ways in which I think we can really bear down on students is that we wind up interviewing everybody who applies to Harvard College, and most schools don't do that. So we get to see a lot more texture sort of beyond the paper and whatnot. But for schools that are looking for the texture and who won't be able to meet a candidate in person, a school-specific application can be, does have its utility. I actually met with a group of counselors here in the city last week and was castigated by any number of them for the Common App, because it means more work for them and too many kids applying to too many schools, and it's too easy and all the rest of that, which is the exact obverse of why we started using the Common App. We were supposed to make it easier for everyone. So, no good deed goes unpunished.
So can I just add very quickly, I must do so in my role as being on the board of the Common Application, that contrary to popular belief, the Common Application has not push the number of it's not the cause for more students submitting more applications. And whenever you read articles in the press about why are more students submitting more applications, everyone says, oh, it's the Common Application because it's easier to do so. And the Common Application has tracked application submissions since the Common Application went online. You all know that when it was originally established 30 years ago, it was only in paper. Most things were only in paper, and it's been online now probably for about 8 years, 9 years, and the average submission of applications, students who use the Common App online, on average submit around, I'm going to round up, 4 applications using the Common Application. It's 3.9. Last year it was 3.8. So it has remained steady over the last 5 or 6 years. And so if students are submitting more applications, it's not because of the Common Application. They're submitting more applications partly because of all the reasons we've talked about. There's this drive and this desire to be at the institution that the student feels is the best match, and there's more unpredictability today. Colleges, high school guidance counselors used to be able to say, oh, here are some safeties. Here's some reaches. They don't have the same reliance any longer. But I did feel the need to at least say that the Common Application is not the culprit when you think about why are students submitting more applications.
Thinking to the future about how you're moving to Web 3.0, is there any concern that your technological advancements in general will outpace the low-income areas from which you try to pull your demographics, whether racially or socioeconomically or whatever you're trying to pull?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and that's one that we've been looking at. But one of the things that's interesting about this move to 3.0 is the folks that are driving this train are the end users, the kids. And regardless of socioeconomic status, they did some research at Brain and Cognitive Center at MIT and found that looking at the brain of a 17-year-old today and the brain of a 17-year-old 20 years ago, they're just wired differently. So they have the ability to multitask and give something 5 minutes. And that extends beyond their socioeconomic status. So the technology is being pushed by the end users. Therefore, they're not the ones who are going to be left out. If we're not careful on our end, if we are not supplying them with what they need, then we will become the ones overlooked. There's this big argument in my office, or there was before we did our last VUE book, that it didn't look very Ivy-like or very professional. And what we were trying to say is that's fine because we're not marketing to our grandparents. We need something that they're going to see with quick snippets and they're going to be able to comprehend. And why is this thing so thick anyway? Let's put it all online. And so that's where students want. So in many ways, they're driving that train, and they're not going to be left out.
I think several of us monitor that very closely in terms of, if 90% of the names that we buy from Student Search have an email address, what does that other 10% look like? Where are those students, and how are we reaching out to them? I think it's a fundamental tenet of the work that we do together. Many of you provide some of the connectivity for some of the students that don't have it at home, and through schools and other ways. But the whole notion of the information divide and has there been progress? I think that the good news is that there has, and as we look to see who doesn't have the access, what can we do institutionally or through outreach efforts to fill that gap?
So I just want to say very quickly, as another example, and a very good point that you raised, 2 years ago, we were considering doing away completely with our paper application and requiring that all students apply online. We decided not to do that. We looked at our students, the profile of students who were submitting applications via paper, and granted, that year we had gotten 30,000 applications. So of the 30,000 applications we received, 26,000 were online and 4,000 were on paper. But of the 4,000 that were submitted on paper, students of color were disproportionately represented in that group. Higher percentage of students of color were submitting their applications via paper. And we looked at that and said, end of discussion. We're not eliminating the paper application. Maybe we print fewer paper applications, but it doesn't mean that we eliminate paper altogether. So absolutely, that before any institution makes any kinds of decisions about how you're communicating with the public, particularly when you're talking about electronic communication, you have to look at your demographics and see how or what population is going to be affected by that decision.
It's been a couple of years since the University of Michigan case, and just curious as to how it's played out at your institutions as far as your population and students of color.
Well, I think one good thing happened out of that. We'd had all of these programs that were designed to serve students of color that were created 15, 20, some 30 years ago, that folks had no idea what they did. They had no idea why they were there. They were started for X reason, and then they just morphed into something bigger than themselves. So it forced us as institutions, or it forced MIT as an institution to say, what is this? Can we clearly name it? Do we know what it is? And so in that sense, it helped us to realign some things, which probably would not have happened before then. It makes us think more carefully and ask very certain questions. Who is this designed for? Who do we want to do? But it also helped us to say very clearly, we're an affirmative action school, and we're committed to admitting every admissible student of color in this end of conversation, which is very nice to be able to do because we're a private school. So I think in many ways it gave us some pause, and we're moving more delicately. But I also think that, bless you, what I'm hoping will happen is that I think it's really affected some of our outreach. So that's where I hope to be able to make more connections with community-based organizations, because we don't have the ability to go out and mine like we did, and all of the low-hanging fruit has been pulled. So if we have a good relationship with nonprofits, and they are saying, I understand your institution, here's a student you might not traditionally look at, but here's what we know about you and here's what we know about him, does this student have a good chance? And so we're hoping you'll fill that void and help to keep that pipeline moving.